Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Kallia and Ram are at their wits' end with their sleepless baby when they realize Kallia's Greek mother is on a secret mission to exorcise the family from the evil eye. Trapped between the pressures of new age parenting, old world superstitions, and meddling in-laws, they fight to hold on to their dreams. Wow, what a wonderful film. Removal of the Eye. We're joined today by the co-directors, co-writers, and many other hats were worn, Artemis, Shaw and Prashanth Kamalakanthan. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us.
We're happy to be here.
This is just a terrific film on so many different levels. I really want to convey this to any of our listeners and all of our listeners that it is funny, it is intimate. There is so much here in terms of family dynamics, cultural influences, new age influence, so much going on, but it's funny, very relatable, and very humanizing. Where did this story come from? What's sort of the origin story? And if I have two people on the show, I always ask the wrong person. So step up, whoever, Artemis or...
So Prashanth and I met when we were in film school. And we went to a film program where we were taught to, do every role. But, we both had our ideas of what roles we would fit into. We started collaborating together. Eventually we got together, ended up getting married. And when we were stuck together in COVID, we decided that we would take a project that we've been outlining it and try to shoot it ourselves. So we said, let's see what it's like to be both behind and in front of the camera for the first time. It was lockdown. We didn't have any crew whatsoever. We didn't have any cast to work with. But we remembered that we'd made films in this style, putting a camera on the tripod and running to the frame when we were kids. So why couldn't we do it now as adults with fancy film degrees? We'd been taught to shoot with a 20-person crew, but we learned how to do everything. So what was stopping us? And the result of that film was called New Strains, which came out 2 years ago. Seeing that, both we were happy with the product of New Strains, we did it as an experiment. We did it as a way to pass the time in COVID, but we actually saw that there were real benefits to shooting in this way. We liked the intimacy of the production. We liked that actors could take risks that they normally wouldn't if there's like a bunch of people watching them, eating a sandwich in the background on a film crew. And we liked that it was cheap and nimble and that you could have the flexibility to respond to real things happening in your life just then, right? Because if you wanted to make a film about COVID in the conventional way, it might not come out until 2027, right? Films take years to make. And we were able to make a film reflecting on lockdown in a course of a few months, a year total, but we didn't have to wait for years and years to get financing. So that was really exciting for us. So cut to a few years later, and we've just had our first kid. We both have full-time jobs. We have a baby, but we're still desperate to make another film. So we said, what if we make another film in this style? Like, sure, we've gotten some acclaim and people say that you're supposed to now graduate to bigger budgets and bigger crews. But again, we had full-time jobs and a baby. And we needed to make a film that responded to our life then and there with, the resources and time available. And we didn't want to wait for years for financing. So we said, let's try and do it again. This time we'll cast ourselves, but we'll also include the baby. We included my mother and father and a few other people in our lives. But we were really, really interested in making a film that spoke directly to the experience of being a new parent, and especially what it's like to become a new parent in our generation, where you're also taking care of your parents, the generation above you. And so time was of the essence. We didn't want our baby to stop being a baby, right? Like, babies become toddlers in the course of a year. So we opted to shoot in this really small scale style again and take it from there.
Okay, well, Prashanth, in terms of opening of the film, the way the film opens, it's from points of view. I felt like that first few minutes is the varying points of view that we're going to see in the making, in the film itself. I love the way that you brought us into that, to introducing us to the people in your lives, in your own lives. I just love the way that you get us inside that apartment and inside your lives. Let's talk a
Thank
little
you.
bit about the intention there. And that.
Yeah, I mean, part of also the advantages of working this way is that you just have so much time with your talent. I mean, your talent and also your family members. So there's this very documentary process of just kind of seeing how they live their lives, the rhythms and the perspective of both the grandmother and the baby were really important to us making this. I specifically started playing around with that 360 camera because I was a new dad and I had all of this anxiety about this time slipping away and the moments that we can capture. And there's this new consumer technology of the 360 camera that was very exciting. Just around that time, they were becoming more accessible. I come from journalism background, and I remember those, like the first generation of those coming out, and all of the optimism around new ways of seeing. We can end war now with these things that are like empathy machines. If you just put a 360 camera in the middle of a war zone, things would change, right? And they tried that, and I think that there was like this this hype around this new technology, and then it kind of faded away, and people didn't talk about it as much. But I was looking at this thing, and I was like, this is maybe, the weird thing about being a baby is that they're looking at the world totally decontextualized, without any baggage of language, concepts, or personal experience, right? And it's like, what is the baby staring at? It's something I would think about a lot, like just looking at the baby, and it could just be a corner of something. It's not looking at a lamp and thinking lamp. They're looking at just the shining edge of something, or maybe everything all at once, right? And so this, at the same time as Artemis's real life mother, who plays herself in the film, was losing her vision, right? And kind of losing touch with the reality that this baby was coming into. So I think the differing perspectives of especially the two main characters, the grandmother and the baby, it was very important for me to establish kind of new ways of seeing. We're not just looking at these people, we're spending so much time, we're ideally looking through their eyes a little bit to understand, what it is that's making them tick. I think the third perspective that we really start the movie with, and to your point about the open, is this question, the spiritual presence of the evil eye, which I think hopefully by the end becomes this more metaphysical rumination on sort of like the air or the breath or the spirit between us, is really what this evil eye is gesturing toward, I think. And so there's this kind of, I think there are moments in which, there are other characters, and there's this kind of the feeling of the floating ghost sort of observing the events from a slight remove.
And in that regard, I do want to explore sort of the cultural, the things that in every corner of the world, there's certain mythology to explain the unexplainable. I like how much you were able to leave this an open-ended question in the film. It was compelling in the film. It mattered to the people in the film, but I just felt like the right amount of attention was paid to it in regard to, should we be accepting this as something that we all should know or believe in? I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm saying this very well, but yeah, I think you know where I'm going here. It's just I like the tone that you took in telling that part of the story.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's it's part of my own process of development around relationship to our culture and cultural practice and tradition and religion even. I mean,
Yeah,
both of us, Artemis is Greek, I'm Indian, come from these very ancient
mhm,
societies that have all of these holdovers and traditions and myths that people kind of sometimes repeat subconsciously, or they engage with in private ways, despite it being given to them by this collective or this society. I mean, as a Hindu in India, I went to the temple, and you would see flying monkeys and elephant-headed gods, right? And
yeah,
there's the entry level of those myths is, well, there was actually a flying monkey, and there's actually the elephant-headed god. And then over time, you start to see it as a metaphor. You start to reject the fairy tale aspect of it, and then I was like irreligious for a while, and then I came back to it as a kind of, oh, well, there's some sort of poetic truth here. This is all like kind of, this is speaking in analogies, and I think that we we find that kind of fluidity and the evolution of the relationship to the culture itself to speak to something really profound and true about your relationship with life, that changes from the point at which, you're only seeing people getting older and passing away, and then you bring a new life, but then you know that they're on the same trajectory. So it's like this constant renegotiation with, what is this thing that we're all immersed in?
Yeah.
One thing that is interesting to us, I think, is we're both sort of hyphenated Americans, and one thing that's interesting about like folklore is that it obviously transforms depending on where you go, and there's traditions that are held onto and traditions that disappear. And the evil eye, it's like a pretty common mythology throughout the Middle East. There's a version of it in India. And it's an interesting tradition because so the evil eye, you get it, right? You get this sort of like mini curse often if something good has happened to you, if you're showing off in some way, right? So at a Greek wedding or at a baptism, everyone will be saying ftu ftu, meaning like they're spitting on you. And it's a way of making you dirty and tarnishing you a little bit so that you don't get the evil eye, right? This good thing is happening to you, so let's protect you by spitting on you, right? Let's like make you a little bit gross. Yeah. And in India, if someone takes a picture of a baby, traditionally, they would add maybe some warts to make the baby ugly, because if the baby's too cute, right, they can get the evil eye, right? It's about jealousy, and it's about showing off and humility and, not stunting too much. And that whole tradition in some ways is a little bit in conflict with American culture, which is all about individualism, a lot about showing off. You think about the way people present their babies on Instagram and their lives to the general public. And I think our characters in the movie, Kallia and Ram, we're both dealing with ego on some level, right? Like we're both trying to get famous, we're both trying to be successful. And so there's this interesting thing going on with the grandma's character who does the evil eye. Even she admits that she doesn't totally know why she does it, right? Except because her grandparents did it too. But she's trying to maintain those traditions, and we, the younger American generation, have trouble accepting it.
Also, there's an element, take it to other cultures, yin and yang.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, and also the collective unconscious, the philosopher whose name just left me, who talked about the humans'
Jung?
collective,
Jung?
Jung, yes, yeah, Jung talks about this collective unconscious. We share too many perspectives across the world about the same things, the unexplainable, the fact that the humans are the only species that buries their own, and just things like that are a reflection of, in some version, I know I'm a little waxing philosophically a little bit here, but that's that element in the film that it elevates this story in a way that it allows you to think about things like this in a very relatable context. So I just thought you did all of these different things beautifully. I want to talk about the performance of your mother, Artemis, in this film. And I don't know how much is performance and how much is her. It's hard to tell. And I think that's a testament to the direction that you gave her in bringing this role to life. I just really was taken by that.
Yeah, that's my mom, Katerina Shaw. She's a lawyer by training,
Okay.
retired a few years ago.
Okay, we know that. We know that.
But she, she had never acted before this role. Her father was actually a filmmaker, and so she was on set sometimes as a little kid, and she always found it very boring. Why so many takes? Why so many angles? Was always her complaint. And we always thought that she would have an interesting presence and make for a good actor. The interesting thing about my mom is that she's never cared what anyone thinks of her. She's extremely independent, and she also has an amazing ability to focus. So collaborating with her on this was extremely fun. She was a bit resistant at first. And, we were shooting in bits and pieces. We would do 2 hours on Tuesday and an hour on Wednesday. We shot bits and pieces with her over time. And at first she was getting frustrated with the number of takes and the number of angles. But quickly she got very, very into it, and we improvised the dialogue in this film, which meant that she was able to contribute a lot and really bring herself to it. And I think once she realized quite how much ownership she could have over the character, the more fun she had and the more she enjoyed it. We say it was shot like a documentary in that people are playing versions of themselves. We're in real locations, and we're not following a conventional production style, but this is a detailed fiction film where everything's pre-planned and all the beats are hit. And my mom, a non-professional first-time actor, was hitting every beat in a 5-minute scene, which is hard for anyone to do. So it was just, she has an incredible ability to focus, and I think she had a lot of fun doing it. She hadn't acted before, and I think maybe she always had thought of actors more as like props in a scene, and I think having ownership made it fun.
Did you shoot this in sequence?
More or less, yeah. There were a couple of out of sequence things, maybe
Yeah.
due to the kind of more logistically complicated stuff was slightly out of sequence. But I think, yeah, I mean, working with first time actors, I think that's a method that helps a lot, right? Because you're kind of writing the story, and the story had to change. There were different versions. We weren't actually quite sure whether it was the evil eye that was the central kind of traditional the myth that kind of anchors the journey. It made a lot of sense for a lot of the reasons that we're talking about. But Katerina herself is not a huge believer in those, like she calls them, silly superstitions.
No.
But I think she was able to reach and understand that this is just something that she's stubborn about. Like it's
Yes.
something that she's committed to that we have different ideas about, and she was able to play that conflict
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah.
I also think that the shooting style reflected our talent and the subjects that we had to work with. We knew that the baby had to be really central, because that's the other thing about this film. That was an impetus for this film, is that there aren't that many films about parenting that center so much the actual new character in the story. It's a lot of like, and partly is logistical. You can't actually work with a baby on a professional set for long periods of
It's
time.
true.
Like they're swapping babies in
That's
big budget
true.
movies.
There's
So
no close-ups of infants
so you
in
can't.
movies.
You'll see it sometimes. Like I was just watching some big show on a streaming show. Like they were clipping it on YouTube or something. It's like, look, this baby in one shot has hair, and then the other shot he doesn't have hair. This happens all the time, and it speaks to how peripheral babies kind of have to be structurally in these movies. So we knew, that's part of the great advantage of working at home with your own child, is the amount of time, like making a home video that we could spend with him. But we also knew, like, he's not an actor, obviously, he's less than one. He might do something really interesting very quickly and never ever do it again. Right? And so the shooting style and approach had to adapt to that. And I think that we were able to find this kind of like dual purpose language with your mom, who was great, but also doesn't have the stamina that even we had on our previous film, where we would do 20, 25, 30 takes just to figure out one angle of one scene. And here everything was moving so much quicker. We were able to cover much more breadth, I think. But, I think the style and the substance had to really be two in one.
Yeah. My dad is also in the film, and he was really only willing to do max 2 takes.
That's
That's what he was willing to give us, and he's a busy guy. He's still working a lot. We would interrupt his work day and say, "Excuse us, can we film for an hour?" So yeah, you're working with
Put on this neck
constraints.
brace.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. These prima donnas, how they are, these Hollywood types, they get,
Exactly.
Want the trailer and the salted nuts.
I want to remind our listeners we're speaking about this wonderful film, Removal of the Eye. We're talking to the co-directors, co-writers, and everything else, Artemis Shaw and Prashanth Kamalakanthan. Another thing about this is it also brings into the ether of the telling of the story all the frustrations of being new parents with your own lives, trying to find your place, moving forward. You're trying to get, is it doctorate or is it your master's thesis? Is that doctorate? And it's sort of a moving target for the last few years. You're trying to essentially become a hip hop artist, and it seems like a combination of film and music you were working on, and all the frustrations that you're dealing with, and just in trying to keep your shit together long enough to get that done. And this film really brings that to bear in like claustrophobic ways. You're inside the apartment. You're trying to figure out how to navigate all this. Or when you go outside the apartment, you're being bombarded by people who are always telling you how you should be raising your children. So it's a constant thing, I'm sure, when you're in public. And you managed to capture that beautifully. I thought it was just a really fun part of the film, and also anxiety inducing, if you will, as well, especially when you're talking on that Zoom call to
Yeah.
oh my God, what a nightmare. What a nightmare that
I mean,
seemed
I
like.
think it's part of our post-pandemic world. I've been feeling this a lot, like, because now we're 5 years, 6 years out from the great events, and I think society has been changed. I think people have been changed. We are all, on the one hand, so much more atomized, alone in our houses, working from home. And then, right, the moment you step outside, or the moment you're scrolling your phone, it's like this panopticon. You're still alone, but you're surrounded on all sides with all of these messages. And I think, I mean, that's the kind of central tension, internal conflict of this film is trying to negotiate that on the one hand, and then this other kind of like bigger thing. It's like it's bigger than you to be part of a family, to take care of your parents, to take care of your child, and it's sort of like, how do you walk that tightrope? I think especially as a parent, you feel this like the guru industrial complex. Everybody seems to have just the exact right theory on how to do it, and the truth is that every baby is different. Like there's no, the thing about parenting that's so frustrating is that everybody's really sure about what to do and what not to do,
Yeah.
but the evidence that you have is one unique snowflake child that will never be replicated. So it's all, you're just speaking and around each other.
And there's this little bits in the film where you've got the neighbor up on the roof whose child is, just wandering around. And then you have that infomercial guy who's also who inspired this guy, I guess, to raise his child the way he does, and just the outside influence. You go to the park, you kind of there's just all of the stuff that is just the experience of trying to navigate this part of your life. And I thought it's just a great job of making all of the outside and the inside world credible and believable and funny as well. There's some really funny things that happen, and also some very dramatic things as well along the line. Congratulations on this film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, the film Removal of the Eye, and I urge you to look for it. Well, thank you both for your time and for this wonderful film. We have been talking to the director, writer, producer, editor, cinematographer of Removal of the Eye, Artemis Shaw and Prashanth Kamalakanthan.
Thanks for having
We're
us.
happy to be here.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.